Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this Christmas Eve weekly ag weather update brought to you by AgCarolina Farm Credit. Well, to get us started, I want to show you a map that's over here on the left. It shows you the statewide precipitation ranks. We in the state of North Carolina have already seen over that time period, January through November, the wettest such time period on record. Our records go back 124 years, and there you go. You've already had the wettest. We've moved into December, and it has been wet as well. In fact, look over here. This is the last 2 weeks, taking a look at the percent of normal precipitation, and the Carolinas, in fact, much of Florida all the way up to parts of New York, have had over 200% of normal precipitation. Now, the bad news is, the reason I'm showing you this is we're going to finish the year even wetter. We've got more precipitation on the way. So let's get right into it and try to diagnose this pattern. It all starts here. This is an animation from our new GOES 17 satellite. And you're looking here out of the western United States and the Pacific Ocean. And what I want you to key in on here are these big low pressure systems that are kind of racing here across the Gulf of Alaska into the Aleutian Islands, and they're coming right on shore. You see, these weather systems are going to be the weather systems that evolve toward the middle of this week and end of this week that are eventually going to kind of lash the southeastern part of the United States. And so it is coming. And by the way, here's just a little bit of neat stuff to look at here as well. Okay, so we know we've started winter because we're past December 21st, which was our winter solstice. When you look at this animation, the brighter parts, that represents where the sun is shining, and the shadier parts, that's where the sun doesn't rise. And this is all a consequence of the tilt of the Earth on its axis. Now, what do you see here? We see that much of Canada and Alaska don't see the sun this time of year. Basically, the tilt of the Earth on its axis prevents the sun from even rising in those locations. So they got 24 hours of darkness some places in those high northerly latitudes. But we are all gaining daylight hours in the northern hemisphere now that we're past the winter solstice. But let's talk more about what this weather pattern will be bringing to us. So here it is all lined up for you. You're looking down on the North Pole. And what I want you to see is look out across the Pacific Ocean. I've got one shortwave here, another, getting over into parts of Asia, another, and they're all lined up to flow with the jet stream here and eventually impact the west coast of the United States and then move across the U.S. And that is going to signal a very stormy and then cool pattern to start our new year. So let's kind of back these off and tell you the major one we have to watch first. It's this one right here. That shortwave trough will dig deep as we move through the 24th into the 25th here into the southwestern United States. And watch it as I animate this forward. It's that shortwave right there. Watch it again. That hits the basically parts of Oregon and California, hits the west coast, and then digs deep light right there into parts of New Mexico and Texas by the time you get into the evening on the 26th. Now, what is the issue with this? Well, this is going to develop a major low pressure system in the Central Plains. Out ahead of it, warm, moist air coming out of the Atlantic, coming out of the Gulf, bringing in the warmth, but also plenty of moisture. And as this low goes racing on off to the north and east, it will drag a front right through that warm, moist, humid, unstable air and give us a big chance toward the end of this week for showers and thunderstorms and more flooding potential. Now watch it. I'll show you what this does here, and then we'll kind of see what the pattern means for our temperatures next. So there it is. There's that big ridge out east, but all that's fueled on that warm, moist, unstable air. And then we see the trough digging into the central states, and that initiates the big cyclone on the 26th, 27th, and 28th. And we see the pattern kind of reloads back there into the four corner states as it gets you into the 29th and 30th. Now, it's interesting to see what happens once we start the new year. You see, getting into the 31st and the 1st, we see this pattern that features a ridge in the Gulf of Alaska, a trough out west, and a broader ridge over the east. So that means we're going to hang on to this warmer pattern till the beginning of the new year. But watch this. As I take you through the first week of January, the whole pattern shifts. See that? And what do we end up getting? Well, we now end up getting this trough feature that sits here over the east coast, a ridge that's out west, and a trough that is just off the Aleutian Islands working its way into the Gulf of Alaska. And all of this is working in concert with this ridge that is building kind of north and west of Europe. And as that ridge builds into Greenland, it is going to help reinforce the cold air that comes diving south into the eastern part of this country. So this is what the beginning of January is going to start off with. So I hope you've enjoyed the little bit of reprieve we've had, the warm-up we've seen in the middle to end of the month of December, because cold air is coming back with a vengeance. Now, before we get into that, let me at least show you what the weather pattern is going to do in the short term. So this is our high-resolution NAM model. We know that in the overnight hours on Sunday and early Monday morning, we had some widely scattered showers that moved through parts of the Carolinas. But as I press play, you see those moved out by the time we get into the early morning hours on Christmas Eve. Now, what you're going to notice is higher atmospheric pressure will dominate over the southeast, and watch what that does. That just takes all of the major weather systems, kind of has them flow around that high in a clockwise fashion. So we got some lighter showers up in parts of the Corn Belt and certainly getting back over to the mid-Mississippi River Valley, but the flow will be like this, keeping things relatively quiet. It's going to be an easy travel day across much of the southeast, certainly into the Carolinas as you get through the day on Christmas. But what I need you to see is, look at what's going on there out west. You see, by the time we get into the 26th, look at this. I'll kind of rock back and forth here on the early morning hours of the 26th. See that moisture advecting through Texas? See the cold, snowy conditions there in the north central part of the United States getting over into Montana, Wyoming, Idaho. That is our next major player, and this is what it looks like. Now we're going to switch over to the European model. I'm going to get you right to that time period. So this is getting into the day on Christmas. Look, higher atmospheric pressure in control here over the southeast. But look out west. There's this huge winter storm system taking shape. And as it does so, this is what it'll look like by the time we get into the noon hour on the 27th. Our low pressure system will be sitting right here. Blizzard conditions on the backside of it, but warm, moist, unstable air getting fed into this from the Gulf of Mexico. And so this whole region I just circled here, I've got concern about flood threat and severe weather threat, especially down in this area. And that's because as this cyclone slowly wraps its way out toward the northeast, watch the heavy rain spread from Louisiana and Mississippi by the time we get into the 28th into parts of Alabama and Georgia and then into the Carolinas for the start of next weekend. And that front lingers. Here we are now into the day on Friday, into Saturday, Saturday afternoon and evening, into Sunday. And which means that's just system one. We have another one lined up after this. Now, I don't have the full details on that, which is why I'm glad I get to give you another video update for next Monday. But look, we see another system coming through at the end of this upcoming weekend and the beginning of next. So it is going to be a very, very wet end of this year. So just to show you, in case you are traveling north, this is a snowfall map that is valid all the way through January 1st. And what it is showing you is the probability of having at least 6 inches of snow. So if you are leaving the Carolinas and heading anywhere toward where it is snowy, expect major travel delays because we have a big blizzard brewing in this part of the country. But what we want to focus on is what are we going to be seeing as we finish out this year in terms of our total accumulated precipitation. And if I take you out over the next 15 days, the European ensemble is picking up on a very wet pattern. The map that you see over here is the operational European model taking you out to midnight on January 1st. So New Year's, the moment the New Year starts, and you can see the potential for 2+ inches of rainfall to come into big sections of the Carolinas, with maybe a region in here that could get quite a bit more. Now, a lot of this depends on the system that starts next week, so I'm going to have to watch that one carefully. But this is a wet and soggy end to the year. That is for certain. So let's now transition into a discussion about our temperatures. What you're looking at here is the current position of the polar vortex. It has been displaced. It is now practically east of Greenland over toward Eurasia, with the center of it right in through here. Now, what will be happening at the end of this upcoming week is we will be seeing a sudden stratospheric warming event right where I placed that X. That will kind of weaken and displace the polar vortex as we get to the end of this year, such that it now is oriented back just like this. Now, I don't like to see that if I live in the eastern half of the country, because this signals a pattern shift that may lead to some very, very cold weather. Why would I say it's cold? Well, this weakening and the relaxing of the polar vortex allows cold air to spill south from the northerly latitudes. At the same time, we're shoving a ridge in the troposphere over Greenland, and that just focuses that cold air down into this area. So we've got two of those things lining up. Here's the third thing. I've been mentioning in my videos this thing called the Madden-Julian oscillation, and here's a phase diagram that helps describe this. Now, what is it? It's this global tropical circulation. And here's what we need to know. When we're in phases 3, 4, 5, and 6. Those are the warmer phases for the eastern half of the United States. So we spent, a big chunk of the middle of December and the end of December in phases 2, 3, 4, and now we're in phase 5. That's why things have been relatively mild compared to normal. Where are we going? Well, the yellow squiggly lines tell you where you're going. We're going from phase 5 into phase 6, 7, and 8. And phases 6, 7, 8, 1, and 2 are our colder phases of the MJO. So we now have a tropical circulation that is teaming up with what we've seen in the, in the mid-latitudes, suggesting that we're going back toward a colder time period here. And it may last for quite some time, maybe possibly even into the middle and end of January, getting stuck into this cooler pattern. So that's quite important to be seeing here that we have a tropical feature teaming up with an extratropical feature. So what does that do to our temperatures? Well, as I animate this forward, this is the European Ensemble temperature anomaly forecast. So we're a little cooler than average as we work our way through Christmas, but that's because of that big dominant area of higher atmospheric pressure. Now, as that big low develops out there in the central United States, look at the warm air out ahead of it. This is now getting into the evening hours on the 27th. That is full of moisture, and as that pushes over toward the southeast, yes, it is warm, but it is very wet. Here we are next Friday, and this is when we're just getting lashed with repeated bands of showers and thunderstorms here. Again, I do have some concern toward the end of this week for severe weather threat. But as you saw, the pattern does adjust. And look at the colder air coming in as we start the new year, and there it is. January 4th, 5th, 6th, it finally gets in and gets established. So that's when we start to build this ridge out west and this trough over the east. So there it is, your first week of the new year, major pattern flip, things are getting cool. Okay, getting you to mid-month, I want you to see what I'm watching here. What I'm watching is the development of two big features. One, this trough here in the Aleutian Islands seems to be a persistent pattern that the European ensemble model's picking up on. And that is forcing a ridge kind of over western Canada. Now, at the same time that that happens, what we need to watch is the strength of something called the subtropical jet stream. At this particular moment, this configuration would suggest to me that the subtropical jet stream will be quite powerful. And that gives us a southern U.S. storm track, and that means we hang on to the cooler and wetter conditions through the month of January as well. While up here in Canada, they're going to be having some above average temperatures. But remember, above average in central Canada is still bitterly cold. So it looks as though this cooler weather has some legs on it. It might last deep into the month of January. Now, I want you to know something. I am not very certain about this long-range forecast beyond the first couple of weeks of January. The U.S. model, called the CFSV2, wants to bring in a bunch of heat into this area, but that is not in agreement with our kind of global teleconnections like the MJO and the polar vortex and some other features I'm watching. So I'm kind of scratching my head trying to figure out what we're going to be seeing once we get beyond about January 15th. If you ask me, though, the European model's been the best performer, and that's why I'm showing it to you right here. Okay, to finish this one up, I'm going to give you one last bit of information about the MJO. As the MJO goes into phases 5 and 6, especially phase 5, that's a drier phase through parts of Brazil. But this particular MJO phase will go from phase 6, 7, and 8 very soon. And that tends to lead toward a wetter, Brazilian monsoon. And therefore, we could be getting out of this drier pattern we've been in. We've already started to see the adjustment. Check out this beautiful picture here from Santa Catarina. This is in southern Brazil of a massive shelf cloud. You see these all the time in North Carolina. Well, where did that come from? Well, watch right in through here. Things have been relatively dry across Brazil's major growing regions until the end of this animation, showing you the last week's worth of precipitation. We saw quite a bit of rainfall coming in with the strengthening of the monsoon across much of Brazil, and those storms were right over here. So what this tells me is when I look out over the next 15 days and I see that the European model is calling for wetter than average conditions here, wetter than average in Argentina, and slightly drier here in Brazil's northern growing regions, this is not a weather pattern that gives me major concern, which means they're going to get that first crop bean out, get that corn crop in, and that cotton crop in, it looks like on time, especially because the monsoon will be going back into its normal mode here very soon. So I wanted to give you that update out of South America as we wrap up this forecast video. And with that, I'll go ahead and end it. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you have a great, safe, and Merry Christmas. Thank you.